welcome to Property 118 Meets. My name is Gabriella, and I'm pleased to say we're joined today by Gina Peters, the head of landlord and tenant at law firm Dutton Gregory Solicitors. Firstly, thank you for taking the time to join me today, Gina, and welcome.
Thank you, Gabriella. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ah, perfect. So before we get started talking about all the things going on in the private rented sector at the moment, I want to ask firstly about how you got involved in law and how you joined Dutton Gregory Solicitors.
Well, I was one of the lucky ones that when I was in my teens, I knew exactly what I wanted to be. I don't know whether that was through reading lots and lots of mystery books or just loving the whole police, the idea of the police and enforcement and so on. But I just went on the trail of becoming a lawyer right from my late teens. So when I first joined the law, having done my degree and all the rest of it, I became a commercial litigator. So I became very familiar with all the rules associated with litigation of any sort. And it wasn't until 6 years into my career that I joined Dutton Gregory and specialised in housing law. So I have been with Dutton Gregory as an employee for 17 years and as a partner, an invested partner, for the last 6 to 7 years. So it's been a long time in the industry, actually.
Wow, a really long time in the industry. And then as well, you wrote a great book about lettings law for landlords and property professionals. So I know you wrote that recently. So what has been the feedback from that?
It's really interesting when you write a book. I thoroughly enjoyed the whole process. Never realised I could. But with my experience with the telephone helpline particularly, and answering questions more or less daily, at quite volume, in volume, I was able to use that experience to produce the book. Now, the difficulty with the book is that I've given out a lot of books because it wasn't all about the sales. It was more about just getting a message out there to as many people who are interested to just understand, where their gaps might be in their learning and the understanding of the legal process associated with renting a house. So that has been the beauty of the book, but I don't know where it is. I don't know whether it's sitting on someone's shelf or whether somebody's going to read it on the train when I happen to be on it at some point. It's quite a nice feeling, but it's a strange one. So I can't tell you exactly the feedback from the book. Although whenever I speak to people that have read it, they always say it's been a really easy read, and there's lots of good points and tips in it. So yeah, I've been pleased with it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. And then as well, your book talks about, there's so many rules and regulations landlords and agents have to follow. I think you forget just how many rules and regulations there are. And I know in this book as well, you talk about some of the more unusual questions, like like for example, how do landlords deal with a ghost in their property?
Oh, that's right. I think with any when you've been dealing with lettings as long as I have, then there needs to be some humour coming out from somewhere. And there are some very unusual stories that do come out, and certainly the ghost story was one of them. And how on earth do you get out, remove a ghost when there is, such difficulty in appreciating whether there even is one. So yeah, that was, I just wanted to raise a smile, and there are a few times within the book that happens.
Yeah, oh well, that's perfect. And if people want to buy the book, whereabouts can they get it? Do you know?
Absolutely. It's perfectly buyable from, it's purchasable from Amazon. It's on the Amazon link. I think we've actually had competition on your website before to win a copy, and I think I gave away at least 4 or 5 copies. So yeah, happy to repeat that. If anybody would like a copy of the book, it's not a problem. Just get in touch.
Oh, well, perfect. Well, hopefully anybody that's watching and they want to read the book, then they can get in touch. So, moving on now to other challenges that landlords face at the moment. What do you think is the biggest challenge that landlords are facing at this current moment in time, in your opinion?
I think it's hanging on in there really and staying in the industry because the talk of huge legislative changes is causing such unrest in the industry. And of course, nothing associated with Parliament is ever very quick, unless it's a very important piece of legislation. And this has been on the cards for a couple of years now, and particularly with its, potentially dramatic, abolition of Section 21s particularly, I think it is rocking the industry. So the real challenge for landlords is staying put if they possibly can. And associated with that is obviously making a reasonable profit, because it feels like that has been eaten, not just through, tax initiatives by the government, which has removed quite a lot of relief for landlords, but also, encouraging them to stay in the industry and to ride the regular kind of economic storm with markets going up and down and interest rates doing exactly the same. We've got the media covering the point at the moment that a lot of buy-to-let landlords, or those with mortgages, are going to have their mortgages coming up for renewal very shortly. Apparently, there's about 40% of buy-to-let mortgages coming up with that exact problem. And that's going to cause problems because, of course, they're going to be back on a variable rate that is much, much higher than perhaps they were used to. Perhaps they were used to a fixed rate even. So there are still problems ahead for landlords hoping to make any kind of reasonable profit from being within the lettings industry. And it's not just about capital increase either, because, of course, a lot of property just naturally increases in value. But at some point, that bubble has to burst and it has to stop. And most landlords do not want to simply cash in, because there are other tax implications for doing that too. But at the moment, it might be quite a viable option, which is not helping landlords stay in the industry, which is where I said that we need them in the industry. So that's the biggest problem that they're facing at the moment.
And do you think as well rent controls are a big challenge as well, as we've obviously had the rent cap in Scotland coming to an end? So what's your perspective on how policies like rent caps might impact landlords and tenants?
I think it would be a big mistake for the UK government, or the government in England at least, to introduce this for English landlords to cope with. Excuse me. It feels like interference from a private rented sector through the government by the back door. We're supposed to live in a free market, and I don't think this will be at all well received by any landlord in the country. We have seen it in operation, as you said, in Scotland, and that's just about to come to an end. Whether it will be extended, we don't know. There are just other ways to stabilise the market, and I appreciate that there is always another side to something as significant as a rent control, and that, of course, is to bring stability to the tenant, to bring something that is seemingly unaffordable because the rent increases to something that's steady and affordable. But of course, every one of us, whether we own a property or rent a property, is subject to the cost of living rises. So that still reflects on landlords who may be stifled in terms of being able to put their rents up to cover, for example, the huge increases that some of them are experiencing through their mortgage lenders raising their interest rates. So it's a really difficult balance. But I usually, with rent controls, they have actually pushed landlords out of the sector rather than stabilised it sufficiently to retain them. There's just no drive for landlords who want to prosper from renting a property, really, with rent control. So I don't think we can ignore, actually, that the government are already starting to think along the lines of how rents could be more predictable for tenants. So within the Renters Reform Bill, for example, there are several areas that would help with this. We've got the periodic tenancy coming in, potentially, although that's something for a later question, I think. But with the periodic tenancy, you can only raise rents every 12 months and no sooner. The rent review clauses are disappearing. So rent reviews are going to have to be in line with market value, which is where it tends to be anyway. But that will be on the basis of a 2-month notice period. So we're already seeing little shoots of the government recognising that They want a more stable approach to rent increases. But no, I don't think that rent controls are going to be the answer for our market at the moment at all, or at all.
Mm. And you were touching on there about the periodic tenancies, and then of course in the Renters Reform Bill we've got the well, the abolition of fixed term tenancies, which of course, many student landlords are worried about. Would you say that that's also a big challenge in the Renters Reform Bill?
It is. The government are trying to cope with it by introducing a particular ground for student lets under Section 8. So they're trying to ease the situation by still remaining with the periodic tenancy proposal. I think there are going to be the backbenchers at the moment are really unhappy with the thought of periodic tenancies. And I think this is causing quite a lot of mixed messages coming from government on whether or not this bill is going to continue in its current shape. I know that Wales negotiated on this for quite some time and lobbied on this they were lobbied for a while, the National Assembly. And in the end, they didn't introduce periodic tenancies. So it may well be something which we have to watch.
I think it's something definitely to keep an eye on. And then as well, we had the spring budget last week. So what was your opinion on the spring budget and how do you think it will affect landlords?
Well, the budget was a little bit disappointing, I think. I think most landlords will consider it somewhat disappointing, and again, certain reliefs being removed from them, just making it tighter and more difficult to operate within the sector. Holiday lets, not all landlords obviously operate in the holiday let business, but clearly with the tax regime being completely abolished next year for those, that is going to cause some concern. For those who might have started switching over to dealing in holiday lets, thinking that was a better option than trying to remain within the pure private let rented sector with the short hold tenancies and so on. There were, with a budget, they could have given some sweeteners for first-time buyers. I really hoped that would be the case. They haven't really done anything for them for a while, and there doesn't seem to be any incentive for first-time buyers at all at this time. And that could have eased the situation. It could have encouraged those out of rented property, which would have freed up some stock. And over time, that is always a good thing. And we need it to bring down the demand for the stock to stop the rent increases continuing. I think it was the multiple dwelling relief, which was actually abolished, or is going to be abolished from the 1st of June. That just seemed a pity to me. I don't think that will have a massive impact on the market generally, but nevertheless, it was still a bit of a slur because suddenly there's another relief removed on 2 or more single properties being bought in any one purchase, which tends to link to landlords buying more than one property at any one time. So it's that coupled with the personal allowance on CGT lowering to its lowest level over the last few years. It's been coming down. That is now going to stand at £3,000 as a personal allowance for CGT from April. So there's never, and that I should have said is linked to the higher rate tax payer CGT allowance being reduced from 28 to 24%. Those two combined, with one hand they're giving, which sounds great, and with the other hand, unfortunately, it's still being taken. So there's never really any massive positive proposal that came out of that budget this year on this occasion. I don't feel for landlords. If anything, I think it will still be regarded as a difficult budget and not one which has helped the lettings industry at all.
And then I think, well, as well, we've got as we've been touching on throughout the interview, the Renters Reform Bill, and we've had Michael Gove seeming to confirm that he wants to abolish Section 21 before the next general election. Then, of course, I mean, the $1 million question is, will the Renters Reform Bill be before the next election? Obviously, we don't know. So do you think that with the abolition of Section 21, is it, and was, as we were touching on earlier, is leading to an exodus of landlords leaving the sector. Do you think this will get worse as the Renters Reform Bill makes its way through Parliament?
This has been like the sword of Damocles hanging over most landlords for quite some time now. And nobody really knows why it's stalled. Is it because of certain elements of the bill, such as the periodic tenancies? I know that's where most backbenchers are fighting it and resisting it at this point. I would like to think it would still get through. It's going to be very, very tight, and nobody knows what is in the parliamentary business books at the moment, but it isn't the Renters Reform Bill at this stage, which is disappointing. The Section 21, they've already said in previous announcements that they would hold on abolishing their Section 21 for the moment. But that doesn't seem to feel like it's either being tackled in any shape or form. What do they mean by that? Why have they put it on hold? It was, as far as I understood it, to allow them to sort out the position in the courts, because the judiciary and the justice system is in crisis. So
Yes, we've got the big court backlog as well, haven't we? With that.
We've got a huge backlog, absolutely right. And that isn't providing confidence to anybody in the sector. If that was rectified and landlords knew exactly how to use Section 8 in order to achieve their property back, then I don't think we'd be having such a dramatic conversation about, that whether or not this should come in or not. The waters have been very, very muddied over the last few months. You would have expected to have seen this bill, listed again for the report stage and then the third reading by now. So it's going to be tight. Whatever they do, it's going to be tight. And I think, from the landlord's perspective, they have to appreciate that whether we have another Conservative government or a Labour government, the chances are that Section 21 is going to go at some point. But any new government will still have the same problem with the courts. So there will still be the same lobbying. It's just at that stage, the Labour government will be better able to get their policies through because they will have the majority. So it's going to be an interesting ride, but Section 21 at the moment is still the preferred notice being used by most landlords. So in terms of seeing any kind of rise in that, we could well see it if it is introduced or when it is introduced, because I think there will be some mild panic from those that are still in the industry thinking, oh, I want to come out. So it's a really difficult one. It's not the sole factor behind landlords leaving, as we've heard, as I dealt with it much earlier, with mortgage rate rises and them just being able to make ends meet to some degree in the buy-to-let sector. Then that's also causing the problems that we're seeing and the kind of reticence to remain within the private rented sector.
Yeah, I mean, the future at the moment, it seems, sort of choppy waters, quite uncertain. So, in your opinion, what do you think about the future of the private rented sector?
It will always be as vital as it is now. It's a massive part of our housing market and the economy as a whole. So I don't think it will ever diminish in its importance. What will happen, however, is that there will be, landlords who will have to seriously consider whether or not it's for them, unless the government can start supporting landlords with the way in which they are able to conduct business. Because it is business, let's face it. Even though we're talking about people's lives and landlords have a lot of compliance issues to deal with, I think that side of things is right. We are dealing with people, and the people are being placed in properties over which they have little control, except to live and look after the property well. And in most cases, that does happen. It's the difficult tenants and some of the poorer landlords that are actually making a problem for the entire industry. So we have got a difficult situation, but it's not one that is insurmountable by any means. And I would hope that the longer, but just by looking at the way in which a housing market works, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes, there are constant movements within the housing sector. So we have to hope that landlords will ride the storm and that they are in it for the longer term. And those that are leaving need to leave for, you know, good reason, apart from the fact that, you know, it's time to go because of all the problems with the regulations that will be coming in at some stage.
Yeah, well, let's hope, fingers crossed, that things improve for the future. So, thank you, Gina, for joining me today and giving all your analysis on the state of the private rented sector. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Gabriella. Thank you.